Today I'll be cooking some spare ribs, smoked spare ribs on a country smoker barbecue grill. Main ingredients: spare ribs. They'll run anywhere from $1.89 a pound at Costco up to about $2.29 a pound. Also, we've got some type of a rib rub. First thing we want to do is go over to the grill and make sure everything is ready. Inside a country smoker, you've got your cooking grids, a heat dome, and then your grate and fire pot down below. We want to make sure the grate is seated properly, all the ash is out of it, and that the fire pot is nicely sealed down to the floor of the barrel, so all the air that's blown through goes through the holes of the burn grate. Once you get the grates back in, go ahead and hit your on button, start, preheat. I like to heat it up to about 500 degrees before cooking anything, to just heat everything up, kill any bacteria or anything that's grown inside the grill. And the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you've got pellets in your hopper. What I'm using is kind of a maple blend pellet. Fill our hopper up. This hopper, I believe, takes about 6 to 8 pounds of pellets, which is pretty much enough to get through 6 hours of smoking. From there, we go ahead and we start prepping our ribs. Okay, on a rack of ribs, you've got the top part, and then you also have the underside. This right here is called the skirt on a rack of spare ribs. Typically, you want to take that off. It's just kind of extra meat. You can either put it on the grill and use it as an appetizer. It's usually done within a couple hours. It gives it a nice smoky flavor. I usually throw it into the crock pot and use it in beans, or just go ahead and turn the crock pot on for 6-7 hours and turn it into pulled pork. From here, turn it around, count up 3 ribs, take a screwdriver, run it underneath this membrane. This membrane does not allow any of the smoke or any of the flavoring from the spices to penetrate, so you want to make sure you take this off. This is probably the most important part to making ribs, is getting this liner off. Take a piece of paper towel and just pull it. Shouldn't take more than a few seconds to take that off. Okay. From here, what we have is a pretty erratic piece of meat. We've got some thick parts over here, thinning all the way down to some real thin parts on the end. To cut ribs St. Louis style, typically you make a rectangle out of it. You take off this thickest part of the rib, leaving a nice even amount of ribs thickness. At this point, I'm cutting right through the ribs. Make sure you have a nice sharp knife in order to go through. Take this chunk, throw it in the crock pot, turn it around, and just to make the ribs look good, nice and rectangle, that's a beautiful set of ribs. Okay, from there, take our spices and give the whole rack a nice coating of rubs. Flip it over. Usually the fattiest part of the rib is right here. If you're not the type of person that likes fat, go ahead and take that off, throw that away. Otherwise, just give this a nice heavy coating of rubs. Okay, let's go back to the grill. If you watch that thermometer, you can see we're starting to move up in temperature. Once it hits about 400 to 500 degrees, we know that the grids and everything are nice and sterilized, and we can go ahead and turn the grill back. to about the 10 o'clock position. On a day like today, it's about 60 degrees outside. You'll get about 225 degrees right there. Okay, we're on our last rack of ribs. Take this heavy, thick part off. Flip it over. The end off. Paper towel. Any type of rib rub is good. Take this fatty part off. Every set of spare ribs has this nasty fatty part. Alright, let's go check out the grill. The grill is now cooled down to, we've got about 250 degrees on there. We like to have about 225 is what our goal is. So I'll turn it down just a little tiny bit. Just a little bit will get us back down to 225 degrees. Go ahead and set our ribs in. This grill is a model 450, which holds 4 racks of St. Louis cut ribs quite nicely. Okay. Go ahead and close it. It'll ramp up to back up to 225 degrees. Right now it's noon. We just put the ribs on. The ribs should be done at 6 o'clock this evening. What I do is smoke them for 3 hours at 225 degrees. Actually, for the entire 6-hour period, we're at 225 degrees. That's a constant throughout. So we'll come back in 3 hours. All right, it's been 3 hours. Grill is still sitting at right around 225 degrees. That's the beauty of having a pellet grill that comes standard with a potentiometer. You just kind of set it, potentiometer, where you hit your temperature on the lid, whether it's 225, 250, 300, or 400, and it'll stay there for anywhere from 3 hours to 6 hours or 12 hours if you wanted it to. 3 hours, we've gone through probably 4 pounds of pellets. Let's take a look at how the ribs look. You can see they've got a nice smoky pink outside. Alright, the next step is to wrap the ribs. I like to lay the ribs upside down so the bones don't penetrate through the tin foil. If you take a look at the meat here, you can see that the smoke has pretty much gone all the way down to the bone of the rib. You can see they're nice and juicy. because a pellet grill uses a fan as convection to keep the fire going, it's also a convection oven, which holds the juices in much better than a gas or charcoal grill. Alright, once we have them wrapped like that, we'll take our apple juice. What we're going to do is we're going to put them back on the grill at 225 degrees for 2 hours. We're doing what's called the 3-2-1 method, 3 hours outside of foil, 2 hours in foil, and then the last hour we'll pull them out. And the ribs should pretty much be falling apart by the 5th hour. And then go ahead and just lay them back on the grills. So at this point, just rewrap them, make it nice and tight so the meat actually ends up boiling inside the foil. The meat is pretty much already cooked all the way through. What we just want to do is kind of loosen up the meat. And we do that by boiling the meat. A lot of people make the mistake of boiling the meat before putting it on the grill. The problem with that is once meat gets to a certain temperature, it no longer accepts smoke. So you always want to smoke the meat before you boil it. Okay, there we go. We'll come back in 2 hours. Okay, it's been 2 hours. It's about 5 o'clock. We're about an hour before dinner. Look at what the ribs look like. When the rib backs away from the meat backs away from the rib about a 1/2 inch, we know that we're pretty much done. So this is the tricky part. The last stage is just putting the ribs back on the grates to firm up. See if I just lifted it up in the middle, the ribs would fall apart. Just carefully drop them in there. See that rack? You can tell the bones are just perfect. Okay, now that the ribs are out of the tin foil, the last step is just letting the ribs firm up. Right now, they're a little bit slippery, a little slimy. Just put them back on the grids for anywhere from 15 minutes, half hour to an hour. It's up to you. If they're not quite done, these are obviously well done. You can see the ribs sticking out between a 1/2 inch and an inch away from the meat. We know they're well done. So the next step is just letting them firm up for a few minutes. Okay, ribs have been in there for another 15-20 minutes. Some people like a little bit of barbecue sauce on their ribs. Other people don't. I'm just going to put a real light layer of barbecue sauce on here. Barbecue sauce should just be put on at the very last 15-20 minutes or so. The sugars in the barbecue sauce will burn if you leave them on too long. Okay, this is our last step. Ribs are looking good. They've got a little barbecue sauce on them, just a real light layer. It's been on for about 15 minutes. And these are pretty much falling apart. You can see they'll fall apart if I lift up too much. Done just perfectly. That's it. Let the ribs rest for about 10-15 minutes and they're ready to serve.